whether or not gender confirmation surgery and hormone blockers on young children is ethical because of this fact. And this was what they were talking about, where people at one point in time wanted to be trans. They listed several famous examples. And then as they became older, just decided to be gay, including women who wanted to be men who just became gay women. And I think, what's that girl's name that was in John Wick? Ruby Rose. She was one of those. She wanted to be trans when she was younger, and now she's just a gay woman.
So look, I know quite a few trans folks, right? And I have to be honest, none of the ones that I know I don't know any trans women personally who were gay men up until they transitioned, right? I know quite a few trans women who were straight men, right? Or who, lived their lives as presented as straight men, right? And then transitioned, right? And
often become lesbians. It's very odd.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the ways that people can be. I really recommend that. The other thing I was going to say is that I do know also among the trans folks that I know, or the trans people who speak about this that I've heard, so many of them say, I wish I had access. I knew this about myself at a very young age, and I wish to God that I had the ability to receive these hormones at a young age. My life would be so much better. And I'm not going to argue with those folks.
I wouldn't argue with those folks either. But you have to address the fact that there are people that have gone through transition surgery and said, "I wish to God that I never did this." There's a lot of those people too. So if you're looking for anecdotal evidence and you want to be objective, you kind of have to look at both sides of it.
I'm sure we can find the anecdotes. I'm very curious, and this is what I'd go consult my friend or my recent interview subject, Brent Tannehill's work on this, to see how many are in each group, right? And which sets of these folks are the outliers. I think the folks that you're talking about are probably the outliers, but I can't confirm that.
All surgeries have potential costs. However, according to a Swedish study of 324 patients, 41% of whom were born female, surgery was associated with considerably higher risk for mortality, suicidal behavior, and psychiatric morbidity than the general population. So that's people who got the surgery.
I am curious. Wait, 3.41% of them. I mean, the devil of this is in the details, right? Because how much is the higher risk? What does it mean? 3.1% of who were born female.
Well, some of them were born female, and the other ones were born male. The males that transitioned to females is what it's saying. It's only saying a small percentage of them were born female that transitioned to male, but the larger percentage was males who transitioned to female, and that surgery that they received was associated with considerably higher risks for mortality, suicidal behavior, and psychiatric morbidity than the general population.
Sure.
So that's not healing them. That's saying that having that surgery is associated with higher risks of mortality, suicidal behavior, and psychiatric morbidity.
But it also says above, following surgery, patients report lower gender dysphoria and improved sexual relationships. Right.
So we're talking about everything's awesome.
Well, this isn't saying that people are killing themselves.
Well, you're looking for something that confirms a previously established opinion.
And as are you. I mean, we're looking at this, and we should always be careful of drawing too much from a single study and look at it widely, right? What was the point I was about to make? Off my head. I'm sort of at the. Here's what it was. Surgery. Another thing I know from speaking with trans folks is that surgery is overemphasized, right? And that surgery for those folks is not the. We as sort of straight cis people tend to put too much emphasis on, like, did you get the surgery yet or not? Right. And really it's more about what are you living as, and what is, what sort of set of hormones do you have, right? But I would really, I've sort of reached the limit of like my facility with this topic. I really want to shout out videos made by a friend of mine. Her videos are called ContraPoints. Her name's Natalie Wynn, and she does these, she's a former philosophy PhD, and she does these incredibly funny videos about, it's not just about trans issues, about all types of things. She has a really great one about comedy recently. But she really breaks down like a lot of misconceptions, right? And has really changed. Every time I watch one of her videos, I'm like learning new things, and like new ideas are like pop, pop, pop in my head, And I think you should check them out. And you might enjoy talking to her on the show. She's like a really fascinating person. ContraPoints.
It's an incredibly complex subject.
It really is.
It really is. Buck Angel on the podcast before, who transitioned from female to male, which is also a different and interesting thing.
Yeah.
You know, and he said that his whole life just felt like he was a boy, and he didn't understand why he didn't have a penis. He didn't understand, like,
Yeah.
it didn't make sense. And then once he transitioned to being a male, then he felt complete. You know,
Yeah.
I don't deny that. My entire concern is that you're making decisions for children.
Yeah.
And that this is a completely new thing with no historical precedent. We've never done this before. There's not like a history of hundreds of years of hormone blockers being used on young children, and whether or not that is healthy and promotes a positive life. I feel like if a child thinks they're a girl, let them live as a girl. But you don't have to hormonally engage with their body with chemicals. It just seems crazy. It seems ill-advised. It seems like this movement of acceptance and progressive thinking in many ways is a fantastic thing. It's a fantastic movement. But this seems to me to be a leap, and that you're making this leap to confirm your ideology, and to confirm that, you know, you're 100% cool with trans people, and you're 100% cool, and you're going to recognize this child as trans, but you're doing something. You're doing something to this child's body that you can't turn around. And if this child decides at whatever age we decide that you can make rational decisions to transition as trans, let them fully develop first. Let them be a person. Let them make these decisions. If you want to identify as a woman and you want to keep your penis, that should be fine too. There's nothing wrong with that. If you want to keep a functional penis, you want to identify as a woman and not even take hormones, who cares? Do that. Do that. But when you're stepping in to a developing baby that's only been alive for 6 years, and you're shooting chemicals into its body to change the way it develops, show me the research. Show me the decades of peer-reviewed studies on one of the most important things that we know of, the development of a human being, where you're going to hormonally interact with their body in some sort of a random Dr. Frankenstein sort of way. Like, what evidence do we know? What evidence do we have that this is a powerful, absolute, like, intelligent, smart way to handle a child's life over the long term? Like, when these kids grow to be 60, as opposed to kids who don't get the hormone shots when they're 6, these people are 15% more happy. There's nothing like that. But yet people are jumping into it because it seems like the thing to do, because it seems like the tide of society is moving in that direction.
Well, I don't jump into it for that reason. I do think that when we're talking about an issue that affects those people, right, the first thing we should do is listen to those people, right?
Listen to the children.
Listen to the children, and listen to the adults, right, who said, I used to be that child.
Okay.
You know?
But they are not that child. And, you know, to you say, look, everyone's different. So for them to say, I was that child, that's nonsense. You were a similar child in a similar situation. You were not that child.
No, they're not literally saying they're
but,
that child.
But they don't know how that child is feeling. They don't know how much that child's being influenced by its environment. They don't know how much their thoughts and their expressions are being encouraged by their parents. They don't know that child.
Sure. So my point is, when you and I are talking about this right now, we're speaking pretty hypothetically, right? We're talking about a child that is not in the room that we don't have. We're talking about a fictional child, right? So what we really care about are the actual people, right? And when we talk to the actual trans folks, right, and talk to, say, hey, what do you think? How do you feel? And, include them in the conversation, I think we have a different conversation about it,
We do have a different conversation, but we also have a different conversation. We talk to people that have regret from transition surgery, because there's a lot of those.
Sure, but we don't have either of those folks in the room.
Right, but we have to acknowledge that they're real as well.
Yeah, I'm not dismissing that those people are real.
Right, but when we say, if you talk to trans folks, you get this impression, that's not necessarily true. You get a wide range of impressions.
No, I wasn't talking about specifically the impression that I wasn't saying we should reason from anecdotal evidence, right? I'm saying that, look, the last conversation I had with a person about this was a trans military veteran who is a researcher who wrote a book on these issues, right? Comprehensively looked at the research and told me that the research shows that the evidence that you're asking for exists, maybe not on a 30-year timeline, but there have been studies of this, and here's what we know about them, right?
About children transitioning?
Yeah, I mean, that is my understanding. I have not looked at the research myself. You know,
I don't think
have not
there's
done this
research
topic on
that
my show.
shows the positive benefits of children transitioning. I don't think that exists.
Well, we can't solve that in this conversation right here. So that my point is, look, I'm not going to go out on a limb and tell you more than I can say off the top of my head, right? Because I'm not an expert on the subject. This is something that, you know, if this were something we had done on our show and I had dived into the research more, I could tell you more. I know it exists, but I can tell you what I have been told exists by people who have made it their business to know, you know. So you know, that would be my next step in the conversation. But you know, that's what I'm saying is those are, you know, including those folks in this conversation is a really critical part of it for me.
Sure.
So yeah.
But it's a conversation the world needs to have for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's one that we will have. And you know, again, just to bring it back to athletics, right? I think that the undeniable existence of trans, you know, children to teenagers to adults, right, who want to compete, right, and who make a compelling case that they should be able to compete, right, is going to be something that we're going to